We start where we left off at the end of the last epi, where a stunning and brave chocolate lady is bravely running away in hysterics after being chased by a giant bug monster. They escape back through the portal as Xin'Trea closes it just as Kylie Jenner, a giant ugly bug monster with fat bulbous lips, starts to come through, cutting it in half like a riot melt. Luckily and very conveniently, they finally got back to their world and are now a step closer to Xin'Trea. Also conveniently, they appeared directly in front of that random dwarf bird what we were introduced to last week when she achieved her narrative goals within the span of 2 scenes. In the skies above, the giant fuck-off hell beast what turns people into pink fairy dust because reasons totally appears. So naturally, the small dwarf goes full T800 and says, "Come with me if you want to live." And before you can say, that totally explains her stiff robotic acting then, we cut to the opening titles, before heading back to Meldorf's gaff, which just seems to be a damn cave in the middle of the woods. Turns out the little lass is helping them because she's heard a bunch of impressive stories about how they smacked up a bunch of soldiers in a small bank that one time. And she's also a fan of banging tunes, so super excited to meet the Larky Bird herself. Though the actual dwarf also has the cheek to say she thought she'd be shorter, because comedy, bro. Anyway, they're all brainstorming a way to kill the giant fuck-off hell beast what loves making people into pink mist and shit, when Xin'Trea suggests becoming one with it to gain its strength and power. Because with the heart of the creature they just killed in the gateway and a bit of other vague magic, he can theoretically merge the beast's biological essence with his. And before you can say, kinky, we cut to Balor's quarters back in Xin'Trea, where that Jedi dweeb with budget force powers is rifling through his old boss's underwear drawer, looking for that book that the Empress wants, though eventually finds it under the floorboards because Balor is a basic bitch, and to be honest that would have been the first place I would have looked. Back in the dwarf's damn cavey home, Ayla straight up tells Xin'Trea that he's too much of a pussy-hole to handle such power, and it needs to be a warrior and not a mage who steps up for the procedure and takes on the energy of the beast. So naturally she volunteers herself because she wants some sweet redemption, and also because of that prophecy thing that epileptic barmaid foresaw in the first epi. But the dog boy fella totally wants to be the one to have his DNA corrupted and lose his soul forever. But she says, "Shut up, you tart, because you keep falling into holes." And insists it'll be her what drinks down the bug elixir, and that's that. So naturally, now it's time for a send-off party, and so they all proceed to get merry on the sherry. Well, all except that miserable old Asian bird with a face like a slapped ass. I mean, she almost died yesterday, and has now been given a second chance at life, yet she's still been an insufferable killjoy. God, get a drink down, you love, and cheer up already. Meanwhile, back in Xin'Trea, the budget Jedi dweeb with pathetic force powers totally brings a special magic-y book back to his mistress, before getting slammed against the wall by his own ex-master when Sir Lenny of the Henrys burst in and vows to punish this little simp scrote for nicking his personal property and shit. But before he can chuck the poor cuck over the balcony, Merwin and a homosexual military commander arrive, and threaten to slice up his deaf apprentice like a common hog. And before you can say, why the fuck would he care about some random deaf bird what he's known for 5 minutes when he can get a new apprentice at the drop of a hat and with proper working ears at that, he gives himself up and is taken off in chains, before using an incredibly jarring modern day anachronism by telling the homosexual military chief that, quote, "You've been played." Because that's totally a phrase people would use in a medieval fantasy setting. Back at the party, Callan finally asks why that dwarf randomly has a hammer named Gwen, and apparently it's named after a murdered girlfriend what had enormous jubblies, and she sprinkled her ashes into the smelting pot when she forged it, as you do. Which is weird, because you'd think the amateur lesbian blacksmith would sprinkle the ashes of her dead girlfriend onto a pair of giant scissors or something, but whatevs. And speaking of, you can just imagine Netflix execs telling themselves during pre-production that the only thing better than casting a dwarf is casting a lesbo dwarf. Wowzers! So many boxes ticked! Anyway, Callan then tells her his backstory and how he fell in love with that budget Galadriel bird what walks funny, but Meldorf just channels the feelings of the audience by falling asleep, as the writers hang a lantern on how boring their own characters are. Later, the Larky Bird is back to her old tricks and doing a bit of busking in a damp cave. The singing, though, goes on for hours, because they clearly don't have enough plot to even fill 4 episodes. And it ain't even decent songs, like Boom Boom Shake the Room by DJ Jazzy Jeff in The Fresh Prince, or My Uncle John from Jamaica by the Venga Boys.
But my Uncle John from Jamaica.
Also later, Fuel and Ayla bump uglies under the stars, before she wakes up hours later to find her new lover has gone and nicked her bug elixir thing, what she was totally going to use to get some redemption and shit. Inside, the transformation is beginning, as Fuel is writhing on the floor in a deep sweat and praying to die. And yes, you guessed it, it's just like me at 2 AM on Taco Bell night. Back in Xin'Trea, the dweeby simp fails in his one fucking job and totally can't open the portal to the realm between worlds. And so Merwin decides to swallow her pride and go ask Baylor how to unlock the poxy thing. Meanwhile, Xin'Trea is almost finished completing the spell, as gooey black tendrils come out of the dead heart and infuses the elixir thief with its power. Once it finishes, the Fuel fella lies still, and it looks like it's curtains for the dog boy what loves breaking oaths by porking forbidden princesses. But in a shocking twist what no one could ever see coming, turns out he's not dead at all, and shoots back up with glowing yellow eyes. The next morning, Skian totally betrays the gang by turning up in Xin'Trea and ratting out her buddies for the tidy price of 50 bags. Merwin asks if the lark is included in that, as there's no way she's worth that much longer. Though Skian reckons she totally is, because she's the voice of the people apparently, despite not even giving an autograph to that random ginger superfan from the last epi what was infected with pregnancy. She also wants her tribe's sacred blade, what her royal family stole back when they poisoned her whole clan years ago, and she also needs 50 soldiers to come round up all her mates. The Empress then channels that baldy Captain Picard fella and says, "Make it so." Meanwhile, back at camp, Ayla goes to see how Fuel is doing now his DNA is corrupted and his soul has been hollowed out and shit. He says he feels angry all the time and can totally smell blood, whilst channeling the energy of Kathleen Kennedy in Disney Star Wars when he says he feels like he wants to destroy everything for no reason.
Bruh.
Then we have to suffer through yet another drawn-out sex scene just to pad out the runtime.
No!
Elsewhere, the Empress pays a visit to Baylor in his cell, what ironically he himself designed to dampen magical abilities, and asks him to open the portal where she'll reinstate him and totally absolve all his sins and shit. And he eventually agrees to a second Trucy team up with the same person in the span of 3 episodes, because that worked out so well the last time. But he also asks for his deaf apprentice woman to be released too so she can assist him. A bird who he must clearly be shagging on the side to be so upset at her almost being killed earlier and now wants by his side 24/7. We then cut back to the woods where Skian returns to find Fuel in a post-op state, and is totally shocked to see the spellers giving him the power of yellow contact lenses. Heading on out towards Xin'Trea, the group are led into an ambush by the traitorous Skian, as 50 Golden Empire soldiers cut them off in a dead end. And it looks like it's curtains for these dopey rapscallions, what didn't even notice an elderly Asian lady disappearing for half a day just when they were performing a highly dangerous piece of black magic and shit. But in a shocking twist, what no one could ever see coming, a bunch more other soldiers appear on the cliff tops and totally massacre the innocent guards, who were just out there doing their job and earning money to feed their families during a deadly famine. Turns out Skian isn't a traitor after all, and has double-crossed Empress Merwin and has now taken out a chunk of her forces, whilst adding a bunch more mercenaries to their side. And we end with the gang arriving at the gates of Xin'Trea, geared up and ready to rumble, whilst poor Fuel is bursting to tear some shit up, snarling and growling and juddering in anticipation. So Ayla hums him a tune to calm him down like he's an overexcited pit bull. And that's it. That's episode 3. Though my favourite part was when Fuel became a yellow-eyed demon fella. And I had no idea that this show was going to turn out to be a supernatural prequel, where he's presumably going to go on to burn Mary Winchester to a crisp up on her own ceiling. But anyway, on to the season finale. And probably the series finale at this rate. We start in Xin'Trea, as Empress Merwin tells her army to go and find some grub in the other worlds, so they can feed the plebs and shut them up for a bit. And then she can get on with civilising all the other species in the universe. Or some shit. So Baylor opens the portal and the army of the Golden Empire heads out. Well, I say army, it's literally about 6 of the fuckers. And on the other side, Sir Lenny of the Henrys finally realises what true sacrifice is needed to get out that sweet, sweet chaos magic. So naturally, he slaughters his deaf apprentice, who he was surely porking on the side, like a common hog. And she just stares at him in poorly acted disbelief, and in front of truly terrible green screen. He's then infused with a full dose of said chaos magic, and uses it to suck up a homosexual into a tornado, which also sucks away the rest of the boys too. Dang. Last time I sucked off a gay, it had a very different and rather stickier ending. Anyway... So, after the title card, our heroes head into the city disguised as royal guards, escorting that super wanted doggy guy. And before you can say, where the fuck did they get a child-sized armoured guard suit at such short notice, given I assume they just took them off the ones they killed in the last epi, but none of those fuckers were dwarfs, so wagwan. Skier knocks on the giant fuck-off door, whilst that Jedi dweeb with feeble force powers tells Merwin that he's discovered that they can totally travel through time, as well as dodgy VFX portals to other dimensions. But she brushes him off like a flake of dandruff, as Skian walks in, escorting the Empress's ex-squeeze. Said Skian girl asks for payment, as Merwin immediately laughs in her face and says, "Lol, you ain't getting shit, fam," whilst Ayla takes out the main entrance guards outside. Meanwhile, Skian can't believe this random Scottish ginger who killed all her friends and family would go back on their deal without warning or reason, and now the Empress won't even give her a family's special sword back either. What a bitch. And before you can say, why the heck is Merwin suddenly unironically cruel and evil when for the last 3 epis she just wanted to bring science, art and culture to oppress civilizations, she demands her guards take the old Asian away to get deaded, whilst Ayla tries to inspire a rebellion in the supposedly starving plebs, despite none of these fuckers looking even remotely peckish. Especially that one. But anyway, none of them seem that bothered about doing one of them Marxist revolution things, until another random ginger starts doing a bit of singing, and soon the whole crowd are belting out tunes like they're at a fucking Oasis gig, just without the silly haircuts. Or maybe not. Anyway, some fella named Uthrock then leads the charge, as the entire mob of plebs are proper amped and ready to tear some shit up. Unfortunately though, he asks them to follow him, but releases a pair of smoke bombs too early so no fucker can see where they're going, and presumably all proceeded to smash into walls and crack their skulls open off screen. No! Meanwhile, up in the tower, Empress Merwin asks what on earth happened to her canine lover, as he seems a bit more aggressive than usual, and for some reason way sexier than before. She says she killed his family and clan because she was going to be a footnote in someone else's story, and felt like no one ever saw her. But he says he totally saw her, and her perky little boobies too. And also that strange birthmark on her butthole. But he begins to transform a little more and breaks free of his chains. So the guards usher away the Empress like the pussy old melt she is. But he gets confronted by that giant bug monster before he can go after her and shit. Elsewhere, Skian escapes capture and opens the door for her friends, and sends most of them off to destroy the monoliths whilst they hold the guards off in the hallway. Naturally, Zacharace knocks a face off of that brother deaf fella and tells him to stay alive, which doesn't bode well for him if I know formulaic TV shows. So they fend off the baddies whilst Meldoff smacks Callan's ass, which is portrayed as playful banter here, but when I do it, it's, quote, a PR nightmare and an embarrassment to the company. Later, the other half of the group pass the Empress running back to her room like a riot gag, and so Ayla goes after her as the two mages head off toward the monolith thing. Anyway, the pale ginger white girl tells the stunning and brave chocolate lady that they're actually quite similar, but Ayla reckons she's just a basic bitch and no different to all the other spoiled brats who get corrupted when tasting a bit of power. So the larky lass guts the twat like she's a common hog, and it looks like it's curtains for the #1 character with the most rushed story arc I've seen in years. Elsewhere, Sir Lenny of the Henrys is playing with his newfound chaos powers, and cruelly sets a poor bloke on fire for shits and giggles. Suddenly, though, those two dopey mages burst in, and Xin'Trea hilariously declares that this ends now. But Sir Lenny of the Henrys totally don't want to stop doing all these bad things, and so tries to set them on fire too. Meanwhile, Fuel continues to battle that giant bug monster what just won't die, whilst the pale Scottish ginger woman is still hanging on, and scrambles up to what has to be the most uncomfortable looking throne since anything in the George R.R. Martin show. So, because she got lost looking for a medic and somehow ended up in the empty throne room, she's pretty well fucked, especially when a rabble of plebs burst in doing their Marxist revolution uprising-y thing, and it looks like she's about to go out Gaddafi style, but alas, She just pulls a blade out and bleeds to death rather than get sodomised into oblivion by a baying mob. And look, even the actress can't wait for this shit to be over, because she's so checked out she can't even be bothered to close her eyes when pretending to die. Up in the tower, Dogboy Fuel transmorphs into his final form and cosplays as a budget abomination from the Marvel movies, where he finally ends up besting the giant bug monster before it can make them all into a puff of pink mist. Meanwhile, Sir Lenny of the Henrys is having a full-on temper tantrum and a bigger meltdown than Gemma Collins on any UK reality show.
No, I don't want to play any more games. I'm fucking gamed out. I've had enough of playing games. It's like having a job.
He reckons that people like the two mages he's currently trying to kill have always underestimated and dismissed him, despite him having been the chief fucking mage of the literal king. Anyway, Xin'Trea says the only way to defeat him is to do that merging thing again, to become one with a monolith and shatter it. Because doing merging spells totally worked out well the last time they tried it, and the poor fella they did it to is now currently more bulbous and deformed than Harvey Weinstein's pee-pee. Allegedly! So Zachary binds the two blokes together, and before the Spice Girls can pop up to sing, we cut back to the tower, where that Irish bloke what keeps letting smoke bombs off too early gets ripped apart by the Obama Hulk fella. And Callan, aka Brother Death, gets taken out with one punch like a right melt. So naturally, the writers rip off Marvel again by having the female love interest calming down a hulkish brute with a soothing lullaby, before she shanks the poor guy right in the titty. And before you can say, oh, there ain't no need for that, love, she sits crying over his monstrous dead body like a right drama queen. I mean, she's only known him a week or two. And blimey, I've had hangovers that have lasted longer than that. Anyway, Xin'Trea's plan totally works, at least in destroying the monolith, because if surviving to live another day was also part of his plan, then it failed miserably, because he and that Lenny Henry fella exploded real good and proper. Unfortunately though, he ended up shattering the space-time continuum and also the veil between worlds. So now, any old fucker can just waltz into their universe, and now they have to deal with countless illegal immigrants and actual aliens showing up on their cosmic borders, and all during a bloody famine. Man, these Elvie peeps just can't catch a break. Later, the Larky Bird has given up fighting pale Scottish gingers and is back doing a bit of singing, and turns out she's now infected with pregnancy herself. See, this is why they tell you to wear a mask when venturing outside, and also being around gingers. So naturally, she gets the sweet epileptic barmaid to read her baby's future, and after having another convulsing fit because reasons, she talks about the time of spheres and how her kid and its lineage are totally going to end all times. Or some shit. To be honest, I'm as baffled and lost as that Jaskier fella is when the blonde magical elf lady disappears and sends him back into the middle of that blasted battlefield again. And that's it. That's the finale. Well, there is a post-credit scene when that elfy Jedi dweeb with budget force powers stares at a kid in the street like a right creepy weirdo, but that means nothing to me, so I've got nothing to say about it. Except someone better call Childline. My favourite part though was when that elfy fella was confused and horrified at the sight of the human woman on the beach, despite them looking almost identical to elves at first glance, other than some pinback ears. But man, this must be the most diverse show in Netflix history, with all different coloured performers in the cast, including black actors and white actors and yellow, featuring deaf birds and dwarfs and mages with cerebral palsy. And they even made sure to include soulless gingers and actors who were born without talent. Wowzers, they've got all corners covered. So stunning and brave. Although, if there was one thing I didn't like about the show, it was the fact that she got preggers at the end. You know, women can never just have sex with their partners in the fantasy genre without it leading to some kind of pregnancy, especially when the male character ends up dying. Personally, though, I think the writers should have just pulled a Ryan Johnson and subverted our expectations. First by saying the bump was just a result of too many pies, and second by also making the show good. But anyway, consider ringing that bell thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Tell me if you like this series in the comments if you have time. Oh, and I'll see you in the next one.